Hi, I'm Darren Long from Delta Harbour Assets. On this week's Hard Money Show, we're going to blow the lid off the information that's been missed and overlooked about the economy in Canada, and why you need to own gold and silver. Stay tuned. We got more of this coming.
There are no shortcuts to building wealth today. It takes time, effort, sacrifice, and diversification. But today, diversification means something different than it did in the past. You deserve a more secure way to protect and grow your wealth. At Delta Harbour, we take this to heart. Our mission is to help by inviting you to add physical gold and silver to your wealth strategy. Book a free consultation today and let us show you how to protect and grow your wealth through the ownership of physical gold and silver. Let us show you the Delta difference. Hey, welcome once again. It is that time for another Hard Money podcast. Welcome to the show. YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that. You go to Delta Harbour with a U to find out all those social media outlets. Also on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, and Google Podcasts. Yes, all over it like a hobo and a ham sandwich. So we are ready to rock and or roll. You want to call Darren and the rest of the team to start this end of your portfolio, get it cooking. That is simple. 1-877-323-GOLD. If you've not explored the benefits of holding hard assets in your portfolio, hard assets meaning physical gold and silver. Every couple of weeks, Darren likes to grab a bar and drop it on the table. You can't do that with paper money. Just doesn't make any sound. The hard stuff does. So you want to get this as part of your portfolio, especially now. Darren, let's get going, pal. Scary stuff out there happening right now. There's another interest rate hike, another 75 points coming down the pikes real soon. You're hearing about so many people that thought this would be their moment. 2022, I'm going to retire early, big nest egg. I'm going to sail off into the sunset, have all kinds of money. Those dreams are getting crushed. And now they're just trying to survive. Inflation, as far as we know, hitting 9.1% in the U.S. It's a bit of a shite show here in Canada as well. What do you think? What do you think we're in for the next few months, if not the next quarter, pal?
Well, glad to be back after a small hiatus. Everybody needs vacation, and I took my first one in 3 years. So nice. It was well-deserved. I tried to take it at a time when I thought there would not be too much happening, but it turns out we went through a bunch of things, the least of which is what we're going to talk about on today's show. But in the middle of it all, doesn't the internet turn off? And all of my whole entire family on Rogers Network. So thank you to Rogers, you bunch of dumbasses who definitely are trying to correct it, but are not doing a great job of fixing it. So
they're getting spanked.
Anyways, that's life as it goes. And this week, John, huge reading in the U.S. Nothing new. We knew it's heading in this direction. We've talked about it on this very show. 9.1% was the headline inflation rate in the U.S. And that means we peg street inflation, the real thing, the real deal. Our friend over at John Williams over at shadowstats.com is the place to go if you want to find out more about what the real rate of inflation is at around 12 to 15%, if not higher in some sectors. And right now there is a ton of uncertainty because in a couple of weeks, just days, we're going to get our new reading here. Last one was 7.1. We expect it to be higher than that. And as we discuss further into this show, our central bank is definitely going to be aggressive towards inflationary pressures at this point. Too little, too late, of course, because inflationary pressures historically have legs of their own, as you listen to the beeps of people on our website asking to speak to us. And I apologize, I can't turn that off today. Housing markets are wait and see while sellers continue to pile in, trying very desperately not to lose their shirts as that wheel of misfortune grows here in Canada. Fear is set in right throughout the stock markets. We don't know which direction to expect things to go. Gen Zs, millennials, they're freaking out right now because their pajama wearing work from home days are nearing their end. And if they still have a job at all to go to in the next few months, we're going to discuss that as well. The great ape NFT investors alongside the crypto fanatics they've been kicked in the arse so hard that we sent them right back into the bloody Middle Ages, John. But you know what was popular back in the Middle Ages? Gold and silver.
Yeah.
It was still the same way to diversify your wealth. It meant status. It meant you were protected. It meant it saved you from the loss of value of currencies, which all happened to fail back then, just like they do now. The question is, and has always been, Do you own enough?
Well, we got all that to talk about. So much more to cover. We want to pick up on the crypto space for a bit. We talked about this last time we were on before the break. It was supposed to be like cryptos, the big ones like Ethereum and Bitcoin. They were going to replace, effectively be the next thing for preserving your wealth, acting like gold in essence. Didn't really happen, did it?
We did touch on it last show, and that's absolutely true. To this day, it has not happened.
No.
What happens in 20 years from now with the way the mentality of investors goes and how weird people respond to certain things that have no value in this day and age, like digital apes, for $1 million, or the first tweet ever for 7 million, which is now worth 38 cents. But at the moment, it's lights out for cryptos. Crypto investors, from here to Timbuktu, for the moment, gambled on these types of what we consider to be really just paper assets. They're just speculative tools. Bitcoin's down still around 57% year to date, almost 70% from its peak. Ethereum's down 70% almost this year. Dogecoin, the can't lose folly that was discussed by Elon Musk earlier last year, which took off like a rocket. That sucker's down 65% year to date, and that list just goes on and on. People are not ready for cryptos to be the next replacement for gold or to act like a currency, because guess what? Governments around the world won't let it happen without controlling the hell out of them. What happened to Bitcoin is it was raging in value up to the 10,000+ range. The US government comes in, like many other governments around the world, and regulates the shit out of it. So, of course, they're not going to let the cronies that exist out there who want to manipulate currencies and hide behind the shadows do it without getting their fair share of it. So in no way, shape, or form has this ever replaced gold, nor will it. Gold is a physical asset that cannot be printed. It cannot be reproduced. It comes out of the ground, has a finite amount, and is valued the world over. It's easy to trade. It's like a currency. It can be bartered. It can be brought across borders. There are no wallets involved. You can ship it around the world easily. And aside from the cost of holding it, we're not getting fooled by the analysts and the market pundits anymore that tell you it doesn't pay a dividend and it doesn't put a roof over your head. Well, it's all bullshit. You don't buy gold because you want a dividend. You want a dividend, go get a shitty stock that pays nothing and kills you anyways, because inflation's twice as high as the stock price. But anyways, that being said, I'm not here to say yay or nay on that. I'm just saying right now they just do not look good. And that's not to say, as a mainstream investor, I don't like the idea of the technology behind cryptocurrencies, blockchain technologies, DeFi tech. I mean, all of that has its place. It will be used. Mark my words. I believe wholeheartedly that it has a very bright future. But right now, what looked like a great buying opportunity just 36 months ago, where people made a ton of money and all the little tiny 20-somethings driving around in their Bugattis and Lambos, they got slaughtered and they've got no house to live in, right? So yeah, sure, Bugatti rich, cash poor. Say what you will. This is not for the faint of heart, John. And I always look back to those moments as defining moments to say, hey, in hindsight, once, shame on me. But in hindsight, 20 times, which has happened with gold over the last 20 years, shame on everyone who falls for that story that something's going to be better than gold or replace gold. It's never going to happen.
1-877-323-GOLD, by the way, to reach out to Darren and the rest of the guys at the firm, deltaharbor.com, Delta Harbour with a U, to start exploring on your own. As we continue this podcast, you could do that and educate yourself before we turn you over to the proper ways to get started with this physical investment. You know, when we last left the listener, we talked about some broad strokes of the economy and its fall from grace, akin to some type of, recessionary event and an overall run for cover. I mean, it's, the ship's going down. There just ain't enough lifeboats, bud. But I mean, where do we stand a few weeks later on the issue with inflation and, mounting pressures here at home, meaning Canada? What do you think?
Well, I think back then, a few weeks ago on the show, we said something to the tune of, John, who doesn't like a great story?
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking about fear and fear mongering and buying when everybody is greedy and at the top of a market versus, dipping your toe into the marketplace when everyone's fearful. And it's exactly what you should do. It takes balls of steel. I'm not going to lie. It's not for everyone. And because of our passive nature, John, unfortunately, we're going to miss a lot of opportunities as Canadians because our focus is going to be on the 9 to 5, right? How do we put food on the table? How do we avoid inflation? Well, my colleagues and friends all go to Facebook to whine about high gas prices and higher than normal prices of food and everything. Me too included. I mean, who doesn't like to give a nice complaint and fly it out there? The question is, do you do anything about it? Right? Yeah. Lost in the punishing, I can't live without my internet and phone haze of a few days ago that I was talking about with Rogers while I'm on vacation was some really big news. And I think it needs to be shared. It needs to be talked about and discussed, because God knows I looked across the broad spectrum of media that's being published out there, the news, and all it was for a couple of days was all the bullshit about Rogers. I mean, like, give me a break. We totally missed this news. And to put it into context, when COVID hit in 2020, the Canadian economy basically shut down. I mean, lots of people went completely static or idled, without choice. What choice did we have? We weren't sure how bad it was going to be. The fortunate ones, they kept their jobs, they kept their paychecks, they kept their pensions and benefits, and they were able to work from home, which was a very large percentage of people. Little did we all know, though, at the time, the world was shifting very heavily, and an inherent hatred of work or of working hard was being abetted by this bloody, slimy little pathogen we call COVID. And our government's over-the-top financial response, which basically was just to lather over it with as much printed money as possible. A reminder, by the way, that the idiot running our country decided to spend more money in his first 7 years than all prime ministers combined in the entire history of Canada. So, I mean, contextually, that kind of shows you where we're at. It was unbalanced. It was wasteful. We're now asking for CERB payments back because we gave them to people who didn't need them or shouldn't have received them. And I think the behavior was downright criminal. But, what do I know? I'm not the only vote in town. Lots of people like this for some reason. So on Friday, when that outage happened, there was also a big, huge report. And here is, to some extent, John, how society reaps what they sowed. And the first point is, the report showed from StatsCan that more people quit their jobs last month, in the month of June, about 100,000 than ever before outside of that 2020 public health crisis. So outside of a major event for no reason whatsoever, 100,000 people quit their jobs in June. What? WTF? I mean, This is like the great resignation of sorts, right? We heard about all of this, and it seems to be true. Financial Post actually released an article on this, and for anyone interested, just hit me up in the questions or follow up, and I'll send you the link to it, because now, of course, you should pay for your material when you're reading media, like the good people that do pay for their material. And it showed that A, millennials and Gen Zs, and B, especially, as the data shows, this is not something I made up, women would rather kick their jobs to the curb in the immediate short term rather than go back to the workplace. Wow. So as work from home winds down, that's exactly what's happening. The second part of this news, and this is a massive dilemma, is that despite losing 43,000 paid positions in June, the jobless rate in Canada crashed to 4.9%. That's pretty drastic. That's low in comparison, right? And this is the lowest it's been since they started tracking it some 50 plus years ago, give or take a few years. And this is considered to be, John, by all accounts, full, or what we call maximum employment, meaning everybody who actually wants a job can have one at this point in time. Never, ever have there been this many job openings.
Yeah, but that term full employment sounds great, right? It sounds really good, but I'm assuming you're going to tell me it's not.
Well, without a labor pool to plunge into, this is the second part of this, businesses can't expand, John, especially intensive service industries, right? Take us, for example. We are on the precipice of growing yet again, and we want to hire. So we're going to go out into the mainstream public, and we're going to try to find a very specialized customer relations representative, and nothing. Nowhere can we find this person yet. I mean, it's going to be a struggle. I know what we're up against, right? So far. And if you look at Canada as a whole, since the service sector makes up 60% of the entire Canadian economy, we're kind of hitting a wall, right? Think about it. Have you lately been to any restaurant or any service-oriented business in your town or in your region, and not in every at least one of two establishments seen we're hiring, all positions available? They're everywhere. There's countless. Youth have their choice now, right? And so that's an interesting dilemma, because on one hand, yeah, you would assume that's great. Everybody gets a job.
Right.
There's the doorbell. We're not going to quit going, and that's just how busy we are. So, with this being the case, this is an interesting dilemma. Why? Well, third point, this is really, really driving that inflation train to the extreme, right? Employees are in demand, and it means they're in control, which means wages and incomes are rising historically. StatsCan revealed that the average hourly rate year over year in June rose to 5.2%, which is triple the experience of 2021. And yet, despite this, we know that wages moving higher by 5% doesn't even begin to keep pace with what has been reported as 7% inflation rate or hike in consumer prices. And it's a huge new burden to face for businesses who are also struggling right now with supply chain problems, runaway energy costs, and the increased overhead caused by everything, John, from higher food costs to insurance premiums. I mean, everything in between that as well. And this is going to kill profits, right? That's the result of all this. So people don't really stop to think about it. The businesses owner do, we do. Service-oriented businesses like restaurant owners, they sure as hell do. And it's going to do a number on corporate tax revenues. So inevitably, you guessed it, this is feeding the central bank's aggression when it comes to interest rates and the response to try and cool things down. So what in turn cools the housing and stock markets and the wheels on the bus is all of this pressure. And the wheels on the bus, they stop. They stop turning. The recession sinks in, and it takes God knows how much longer than normal to fix this, because despite the fact that they are being aggressive towards rates, trying to cure all this, the central bank was too late. So they're delayed in their response, which means recession goes longer than normal. Remember back 5-6 shows ago, we talked about this recession being much different than normal, much different and harder to predict the outcomes, much different than we are used to seeing in terms of what could potentially be the percentage of pullback that the economy contracts. And so really, we want to do something that's smart for recession historically. What is that? Well, we want assets that hold value over the long term. We want cash in our pocket, keep the powder dry, and we want very minimal exposure to paper during this period of time, except for those who can afford to do so. What are those long-term assets? Well, among other things, they include paid for product, gold and silver, and they include things like paid for real estate that has no mortgage, that has no HELOCs against it, no liens against it, paid for land that's ready to develop, and so on and so forth. And this just really begs the question, are we prepared?
1-877-323-GOLD to reach out on the phone line. Of course, deltaharbor.com, Harbor with you, and all the usual social media outlets, including Apple Podcasts now and Google Podcasts and Spotify. You can catch these and past shows as well. I'm wondering, though, do folks really understand the world economy right now? I mean, the last time Canada was in this sort of conundrum was it was pre-Trudeau 2.0. It was the original. The old man was in power, right?
That's an interesting point. If you look back historically, isn't that telling you all you need to know, right? I've talked to a lot of people lately who said they love Trudeau Sr., right? Again, I was a young lad during his days, but I think what people felt back then was the same thing they felt with Trudeau now, right? I mean, when he took charge, it was kind of like our Obama moment almost, in some sense. Not that I mean to compare the two, but in the sense that people were elated. And I mean, the amount of selfies that were being taken with Trudeau on his prance around the country after he won was amazing. But, the imbalance between the demand and supply of jobs, as we're just discussing now, it's escalating costs, and it's driving a wage price spiral that we haven't seen in Canada since the old man was in power, since Pierre Trudeau was in power. And if you look back historically, John, this is the key to understanding what does and doesn't work. And you look at what he did to deal with it. Trudeau Sr. was the guy who brought in state mandated controls on how much people could earn, right? We forget about that.
Yeah.
He brought in controls that prevented too much markup businesses could charge for products and services, right? So he controlled the markups. Did we forget about that? I'm sure we did. And it certainly didn't work. And we know this. So historically, if Trudeau makes the mistake of trying to control the economy too much rather than let it work itself out, letting people make good decisions and letting things burn that should burn because they're idiots to begin with, like they should have done in the subprime mortgage debacle. Ultimately back then it fell to the central bank to inflate interest rates dramatically, and they did. Look back to that early 70s phase. Those that were around, our parents and their parents, they suffered dramatically. In 1970, the Bank of Canada interest rate was 7.1%.
Damn.
We're going through this right now at 1.5%. Right? Things are uncertain, John. It's brutally true, but this is the reality we're living in right now. People who went with real estate over the last short while thinking this is the windfall they've been looking for, were last in and now are in a world of hurt, or they tickled the old investment urge with juicy cryptos that we talked about earlier in the show and thought that Bitcoin would be their next big gold strategy. But I'll tell you, John, as we said just a few weeks ago, if you remain seated on this turbulent airplane right now with a balanced and diversified wealth strategy that includes assets like physical gold and silver, then history proves that you're going to come out of this superbly. Mark my words, when we're looking ahead to this end of summer, this end of year, the fall, getting back to school, the bank rate is going to hit 3.25%. Which means chartered bank prime at that point is going to hit just under 5.5%.
Yeah.
5.5%, right? Okay. We talked about how important it was to understand many moons ago, earlier this year, about locking in your mortgage rates. Guess what? People didn't do it. There wasn't this huge, massive run to lock in things. Lots of people are passive. They're too worried about getting out of COVID and getting down to the beach and opening up their cottages and everything. And that's okay. It just means we've got to be smarter. Take a look at those HELOCs. HELOCs are going to be at 6% by the end of the year. Variable rate mortgages, they're going to be sitting around 4.5%. They've gone from 1.5%. They're going to be dancing around 4.5%. 5 years are going to be north of 6%. Depends on, of course, how the bond market responds. But I think what central bank wants is for this to happen because it's part of the aggressive nature of what they need to do in order to control this sucker and get it back onto the pavement. Right now, they're driving in the off-road dirt. And the question becomes, will higher rates bring less economic activity and higher unemployment rate? Yes, it will. It's what the central banks want, and they won't stop until it happens. Not to accomplish this would be a failure. Major fail, since inflation control and a stable currency are two of the central bank's major mandates, right? And the risks are simple. A, this will take a longer recession, as we just said, to accomplish. And B, the Trudeau 2.0, as you referred to it, that gang, they may screw things up again by heaping a whole bunch of financial fiscal stimulus on top of this all to try and put out the burning fire. And then lastly, if you look back to the original point, which was 100,000 people in June quit their jobs,
right,
those are the first 100,000 people who may look back right now and say, Jesus, I just made a bloody life-altering mistake. So, I always say the same thing. When I was 20-something, I knew everything, right? What's the saying that used to reside in every teacher's homeroom? Leave home while you still know everything. You're in grade 7, leave home while you still know everything, right? You got to college, you knew everything. You graduated from university, you knew everything there was, right? I'm going to charge in there and I'm going to make $100,000 a year when the bare ass minimum should have been 40 a year or 30 a year, right? And this is where we sit right now. I mean, if you still want to retire early, it can be done. If you still want that dream retirement cottage or retirement residence to be able to go to the near north, enjoy your retirement years with the grandchildren, with your family, with your partner, if you want to be able to travel freely and live a life of freedom in your retirement years and not have to borrow in reverse through reverse mortgages and do what a lot of people are doing right now, then you have to diversify your thinking now. You have to think outside the box. You have to challenge the stereotypes and norms, and you have to realize your wealth is yours.
Mm-hmm.
It's not somebody else's. You have to look yourself in the mirror and you have to say, screw letting somebody else make the decisions. At the end of the day, I need to plug in an expert to help me with certain things, but I need to be in control of my wealth. I need to be in control of my future. I need to be in control of what I'm doing with my wealth. And, oversimplifying things by shoving it aside and saying, hey, listen, it's a mutual fund. I let somebody else worry about that for me. 6%, that's great. When inflation rate is 20, it doesn't cut it, So ultimately, yeah, you've got to pay attention. You have to welcome change with open arms. And part of that is owning physical gold and silver.
It's really just a kick in the pants, like it's encouragement for people to get out there, educate themselves, do their due diligence, research on gold and silver, and change their strategy. You want to adapt to a time that's, when you get fully diversified and hopefully prepare for what lies ahead, right? You got a bit of time, but here's your hat, what's your hurry? Get on it, right?
Yep. We have to change the mindset, right? We have to get out of that mentality of that one asset strategy, which is just to own our house as an investment and let these paltry little RSPs and the other bullshit little pieces of paper we have define who we are as Canadians as far as our wealth strategy is concerned, right? I'm going to remind everyone, I'm not your financial planner or advisor, right? 18 years of working in this business has reminded me that of every day. I don't want to be. But what I am is I'm an expert in all those things that relate to those aspects. And gold and silver have proven undoubtedly to be part of a well-rounded, well-diversified wealth strategy, right? So if you don't want to, at 65 years of age, work for another 10 or 15 years, then yes, you got to think outside the box. And I appreciate the fact that people think they can retire earlier right now than 65. Good luck to you if you can. You've made some really good decisions and you capitalize and taken profit off the table. But if you're like the average Canadian, you just let things ebb and flow in these big, gigantic cycles instead of opening up your eyes and maybe doing a little bit of reading or research that won't kill you and staying on top of your wealth strategy. You won't be hurt by doing a little bit of reading or a little bit of educating yourself. You can't hurt yourself by investing more time in finding out what places like Delta Harbour Assets are all about, what owning gold and silver is all about, right? Would this guy be in front of you doing this podcast or talking to you on this YouTube channel for 18 years if gold and silver weren't successful? You'd think I'd be smart enough to give it up by now. But when I look at gold and silver, right, a little paltry piece of silver like I have here, this 10-ounce bar of silver, this is real wealth to me. This makes sense. And it's done so for thousands of years. And when I drop it, like you said earlier in the show, John, listen to the sound real money makes.
Nice.
Right? You're not going to hear that sound when you drop a piece of paper. And that's just the truth, right? So when it comes to assets like gold and silver, one of the reasons I love them is because I love family. I love the idea that we can help families. I love the notion that if you're a Canadian listening to this, an American listening to this, a European listening to this, you are living with the same challenges as I and anyone else face. The reality is that unless you are well aware of what's happening out there, you're most likely going to be passive, and that's in our nature to be so. It's much easier to let somebody else do it for me than to get pissed off when they make a mistake. Well, stop doing that. It's not the successful strategy it once was when our parents were investing in their younger days. Now we have to be proactive instead of reactive. We have to have quality assets and we have to spend time focusing on our education and making ourselves better. The times are changing, John, and it makes me wonder, what were we thinking when we made all these decisions just 10, 15 years ago and we thought money printing would be the way out? It never has been. It never will be. It kills currencies, and we are going to suffer for it. So the idea here is just balance your wealth.
Before we close out in a couple of minutes, Darren, maybe talk about opening up an account, getting started with Delta Harbour. What are some of the options you got going on so people know?
Well, keep it simple, John. Start with the website, right? DeltaHarbor.com, as you always aptly say, it is a good website. It's chock full of information. We don't try to be too intensive in terms of sharing that information or throw it down people's throats. They take what they want. If they want to engage, they engage. If they don't, hey, we part as friends. It's nice and simple. You can go to our online store and have very little interaction with our entire firm. Just make a purchase. You know, you can. Here's a perfect example of something. There's a nice 10-ounce gold bar. We had a lot of these sold this week. Just happened to be one of those weeks. That's our product of the week, the 10-ounce gold bar. This happens to be a 4.9 Credit Suisse product, very nice product. And you can go to the website, see the product, find out what the live price is, make the purchase, and pay for it in a multitude of ways. That's just like buying some food online, or just buying some clothing online, or a pair of shoes online. Same retail option. The second is, if you're like us, you do think that it's important, A, to have liquidity, be able to buy and sell your product, and B, to have security, which is probably most important of all, not to have 10, 20, 30, or 100 or $1 million worth of silver or gold sitting at home. So the second option is storage. We have storage accounts that are set up. Our preeminent storage facility is right in Toronto by the airport. And it is a Class 3 vaulting facility, fully insured. You get to visit your product and audit your product, and serial numbers included. It's allocated to you. All the good hallmark signs of real, proper physical gold and silver storage. And you can option to take that storage facility or other ones that we have placed around the world strategically. Whether you're American, European, if you want to offshore some of your wealth, put it in another country that you visit, this is an opportunity to do so, and we can help you with that. The third account is the Delta Vault account. Again, we refer to this as the Delta Vault account. It's bulk bullion at its finest. So if you're an investor and you want exposure to assets like physical gold and silver, let us do all the work. We'll go and buy the bars, the coins, and everything, and you don't have to pay those high premiums. On gold and silver, that premium's in and around $10 to $12. On silver, it's around, I think, 28 to 32 cents. And you add to that the cost of doing business, and you're into the market, as opposed to paying a little bit of a higher premium for a 10-ounce bar of silver or a kilo bar of silver or one of the maple leaf coins and things like that, which can get very high. This account allows you to do that. It also allows to take this 10-ounce bar of gold or any other type of product that you're holding in your accounts and use it as a form of collateral to finance your purchase, should you be in a position to do that. So instead of putting out $1 towards your gold purchase, you might only want to put out 20 or 30 cents, keep your powder dry, and focus on investing other things in the short term. You can always come back to it in a rainy day or pay it off anytime you want. It's open-ended, but you can also risk less output initially. So that's an option as well in that Delta Vault account under bulk bullion. Or last and certainly not least, the registered accounts. They're beautiful, right? One great way to diversify your wealth, instead of putting everything in the paper and just having those run-of-the-mill paper RSPs or liras or pension accounts or RESPs or spousals or locked-in accounts. You can have a registered account of any kind, including TFSAs, that actually holds physical gold and physical silver. And from my perspective, if you haven't used something like your TFSA account ever, you're missing out on a huge benefit. One of the only positive things that our government does for us. Don't get me started on that. But again, this is one of those accounts that really, really benefits those who like or already have RSPs open at other institutions. Bring them over to Delta. We'll show you how. We'll get you set up with physical gold and silver, and you can still take delivery of it. So down the road, if you decide you want to deregister that registered TFSA or your RSP or any other type of registered account, you can take it home in physical bullion. Instead of paying the cash, we're taking it home in something that might be a little bit useless to you. So lots of options with us, and we just encourage you to get the ball rolling by starting off with the website, calling the phone number, and giving it a listen and reading a little bit. Education goes a long way, John, and I want people to know that it's very important. And as we come to an end here, I hope everybody's enjoying their summer months, their vacations, like I did with family, Get out there and connect with your community locally. Support your businesses; they need your support. And as always, support your local food banks, because right now people are struggling. And I guarantee you do not know the story of your neighbor, but your neighbor is using that food bank, and you have no idea. So get out there and support your local food banks. It's very important to us.
Good stuff. And hope you enjoyed this particular segment, guys. We're going to roll for now. Anytime you want to reach out to Darren and Rob, the rest of the team, you could do so to discuss what we just covered in this most recent podcast and get the ball rolling on your account. Get some physical metals in there. Get that part of your portfolio opened up and robust over the next few weeks for sure. 1-877-7323-GOLD is the number. As always, deltaharbor.com, Harbor with you. And a reminder, you can catch this and all other social media with Delta Harbour on YouTube and Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also Apple, Spotify, iHeart, and Google Podcasts as well. They are all over this. So enjoy that. And as Darren says, educate. And we'll catch you next time right here on the Hard Money Podcast.